This is Edgar Rice Burroughs' public domain novel, Thuvia, Maid of Mars. Chapter 13. Turjun, The Panthan. The face of Carthoris of Helium gave no token of the emotions that convulsed him inwardly as he heard from the lips of Hal Vas that Helium was at war with Dusar, and that fate had thrown him into the service of the enemy. That he might utilize this opportunity to the good of Helium scarce sufficed to outweigh the chagrin he felt that he was not fighting in the open at the head of his own loyal troops. To escape the Dusarians might prove an easy matter, and then again it might not. Should they suspect his loyalty, and the loyalty of an impressed Panthan was always open to suspicion, he might not find an opportunity to elude their vigilance until after the termination of the war, which might occur within days, or, again, only after long and weary years of bloodshed. He recalled that history recorded wars in which actual military operations had been carried on without cessation for 500 or 600 years, and even now there were nations upon Barsoom with which Helium had made no peace within the history of man. The outlook was not cheering. He could not guess that within a few hours he would be blessing the fate that had thrown him into the service of Dusar. "Ah!" exclaimed Hal Vas. "Here is my father now. Kao! Vas Kor! Here is one you will be glad to meet, a doughty Panthan." He hesitated. "Turjun," interjected Carthoris, seizing upon the first appellation that occurred to him. As he spoke, his eyes crossed quickly to the tall warrior who was entering the room. Where before had he seen that giant figure, that taciturn countenance, and the livid sword cut from temple to mouth? "Vas Kor," repeated Carthoris mentally. "Vas Kor. Where had he seen the man before?" And then the noble spoke, and like a flash, it all came back to Carthoris, the forward servant upon the landing stage at Tarth. That time that he had been explaining the intricacies of his new compass to Thuvan Dine, the lone slave that had guarded his own hangar that night, he had left upon his ill-fated journey for Tarth, the journey that had brought him so mysteriously to far Aantha. "Vas Kor," he repeated aloud, "blessed be your ancestors for this meeting." Nor did the Dusarian guess the wealth of meaning that lay beneath that hackneyed phrase with which a Barsoomian acknowledges an introduction. "And blessed be yours, Turjun," replied Vas Kor. Now came the introduction of Carcomac to Vas Kor, and as Carthoris went through the little ceremony, there came to him the only explanation he might make to account for the white skin and auburn hair of the bowmen, for he feared that the truth might not be believed, and thus suspicion be cast upon them both from the beginning. "Carcomac," he explained, "is, as you can see, a Thurn. He has wandered far from his ice-bound southern temples in search of adventure. I came upon him in the pits of Aantha, but though I have known him so short a time, I can vouch for his bravery and loyalty." Since the destruction of the fabric of their false religion by John Carter, the majority of the Therns had gladly accepted the new order of things, so that it was now no longer uncommon to see them mingling with the multitudes of red men in any of the great cities of the outer world, so Vas Kor neither felt nor expressed any great astonishment. All during the interview Carthoris watched, cat-like, for some indication that Vas Kor recognized in the battered Panthan the erstwhile gorgeous Prince of Helium. But the sleepless nights, the long days of marching and fighting, the wounds and the dried blood had evidently sufficed to obliterate the last remnant of his likeness to his former self, and then Vas Kor had seen him but twice in all his life. Little wonder that he did not know him. During the evening Vas Kor announced that on the morrow they should depart north toward Dusar, picking up recruits at various stations along the way. In a great field behind the house a flyer lay, a fair-sized cruiser transport that would accommodate many men, yet swift and well-armed also. Here Carthoris slept, and Carcomac too, with the other recruits, under guard of the regular Dusarian warriors that manned the craft. Toward midnight Vas Kor returned to the vessel from his son's house, repairing at once to his cabin. Carthoris, with one of the Dusarians, was on watch. It was with difficulty that the Heliumite repressed a cold smile as the noble passed within a foot of him, within a foot of the long, slim, Heliumitic blade that swung in his harness. How easy it would have been, how easy to avenge the cowardly trick that had been played upon him, to avenge Helium and Parth and Thuvia. But his hand moved not toward the dagger's hilt, for first Vas Kor must serve a better purpose. He might know where Thuvia of Parth lay hidden now, if it had truly been Dusarians that had spirited her away during the fight before Aantha. And then, too, there was the instigator of the entire foul plot. He must pay the penalty, and who better than Vas Kor could lead the Prince of Helium to Astok of Dusar? Faintly out of the night there came to Carthoris's ears the purring of a distant motor. He scanned the heavens. Yes, there it was, far in the north, dimly outlined against the dark void of space that stretched illimitably beyond it, the faint suggestion of a flyer passing, unlighted, through the Barsoomian night. Carthoris, knowing not whether the craft might be friend or foe of Dusar, gave no sign that he had seen, but turned his eyes in another direction, leaving the matter to the Dusarian who stood watch with him. Presently, the fellow discovered the oncoming craft, and sounded the low alarm which brought the balance of the watch and an officer from their sleeping silks and furs upon the deck nearby. The cruiser transport lay without lights, and, resting as she was upon the ground, must have been entirely invisible to the oncoming flyer, which all presently recognized as a small craft. It soon became evident that the stranger intended making a landing, for she was now spiraling slowly above them, dropping lower and lower in each graceful curve. "It is the Thuvia," whispered one of the Dusarian warriors. "I would know her in the blackness of the pits among 10,000 other craft." "Right you are!" exclaimed Vascour, who had come on deck. And then he hailed. "Caur, Thuvia, Caur," came presently from above after a brief silence. Then, "What ship?" "Cruiser transport, Coxus, Vascour of Dusar." "Good," came from above. "Is there safe landing alongside?" "Yes, close in to starboard. Wait, we will show our lights." And a moment later the smaller craft settled close beside the Coxus, and the lights of the latter were immediately extinguished once more. Several figures could be seen slipping over the side of the Thuvia and advancing toward the Coxus. Ever suspicious, the Dusarians stood ready to receive the visitors as friends or foes as closer inspection might prove them. Carthoris stood quite near the rail, ready to take sides with the newcomers, should chance have it that they were Heliumites playing a bold stroke of strategy upon this lone Dusarian ship. He had led like parties himself, and knew that such a contingency was quite possible. But the face of the first man to cross the rail undeceived him with a shock that was not at all unpleasurable. It was the face of Astok, Prince of Dusar. Scarce noticing the others upon the deck of the Coxus, Astok strode forward to accept Vascour's greeting, then he summoned the noble below. The warriors and officers returned to their sleeping silks and furs, and once more the deck was deserted, except for the Dusarian warrior and Turjun, the Panthan, who stood guard. The latter walked quietly to and fro. The former leaned across the rail, wishing for the hour that would bring him relief. He did not see his companion approach the lights of the cabin of Vascour. He did not see him stoop with ear close, pressed to a tiny ventilator. "May the white apes take us all," cried Astok ruefully, "if we are not in as ugly a snarl as you have ever seen. Nuchus thinks that we have her in hiding far away from Dusar. He has bidden me bring her here." He paused. No man should have heard from his lips the thing he was trying to tell. It should have been forever the secret of Nuchus and Astok, for upon it rested the safety of a throne. With that knowledge any man could wrest from the Jeddak of Dusar whatever he listed. But Astok was afraid, and he wanted from this older man the suggestion of an alternative. He went on. "I am to kill her," he whispered, looking fearfully around. "Nuchus merely wishes to see the body that he may know his commands have been executed. I am now supposed to be gone to the spot where we have her hidden, that I may fetch her in secrecy to Dusar. None is to know that she has ever been in the keeping of a Dusarian. I do not need to tell you what would befall Dusar should Tarth and Helium and Kael ever learn the truth." The jaws of the listener at the ventilator clicked together with a vicious snap. Before he had but guessed at the identity of the subject of this conversation. Now he knew. And they were to kill her. His muscular fingers clenched until the nails bit into the palms. "And you wish me to go with you while you fetch her to Dusar?" Vascour was saying. "Where is she?" Astok bent close and whispered into the other's ear. The suggestion of a smile crossed the cruel features of Vascour. He realized the power that lay within his grasp. He should be a Jed at least. "And how may I help you, my prince?" asked the older man suavely. "I cannot kill her," said Astok. "Issus, I cannot do it. When she turns those eyes upon me, my heart becomes water." Vascour's eyes narrowed. "And you wish—" he paused, the interrogation unfinished, yet complete. Astok nodded. "You do not love her," he said. "But I love my life, though I am only a lesser noble," he concluded meaningly. "You shall be a greater noble, a noble of the first rank," exclaimed Astok. "I would be a Jed," said Vascour bluntly. Astok hesitated. "A Jed must die before there can be another Jed," he pleaded. "Jeds have died before," snapped Vascour. It would doubtless be not difficult for you to find a Jed you do not love, Astok. There are many who do not love you." Already Vascour was commencing to presume upon his power over the young prince. Astok was quick to note and appreciate the subtle change in his lieutenant. A cunning scheme entered his weak and wicked brain. "As you say, Vascour," he exclaimed, "you shall be a Jed when the thing is done," and then to himself, "Nor will it then be difficult for me to find a Jed I do not love." "When shall we return to Dusar?" asked the noble. "At once," replied Astok. "Let us get under way now. There is naught to keep you here." "I had intended sailing on the morrow, picking up such recruits as the various dwarves of the roads might have collected for me as we returned to Dusar." "Let the recruits wait," said Astok. "Or better still, come you to Dusar upon the Thuvia, leaving the Caucasus to follow and pick up the recruits." "Yes," acquiesced Vascour, "that is the better plan. Come, I am ready." And he rose to accompany Astok to the latter's flyer. The listener at the ventilator came to his feet slowly, like an old man. His face was drawn and pinched and very white beneath the light copper of his skin. She was to die, and he helpless to avert the tragedy. He did not even know where she was imprisoned. The two men were ascending from the cabin to the deck. Turgeon, the panthan, crept close to the companionway, his sinuous fingers closing tightly upon the hilt of his dagger. Could he dispatch them both before he was overpowered? He smiled. He could slay an entire Utane of her enemies in his present state of mind. They were almost abreast of him now. Astok was speaking. "Bring a couple of your men along, Vascour," he said. "We are short-handed upon the Thuvia, so quickly did we depart." The panthan's fingers dropped from the dagger's hilt. His quick mind had grasped here a chance for succouring Thuvia of Tarth. He might be chosen as one to accompany the assassins, and once he had learned where the captive lay, he could dispatch Astok and Vascour as well as now. To kill them before he knew where Thuvia was hid was simply to leave her to death at the hands of others, for sooner or later Nutus would learn her whereabouts, and Nutus, Jeddak of Dusar, could not afford to let her live. Turgeon put himself in the path of Vascour that he might not be overlooked. The noble aroused the men sleeping upon the deck, but always before him the strange panthan whom he had recruited that same day found means for keeping himself to the fore. Vascour turned to his lieutenant, giving instruction for the bringing of the Caucasus to Dusar and the gathering up of the recruits. Then he signed to two warriors who stood close behind the padwar. "You two accompany us to the Thuvia," he said, "and put yourselves at the disposal of her dwar." It was dark upon the deck of the Caucasus, so Vascour had not a good look at the faces of the two he chose, but that was of no moment, for they were but common warriors to assist with the ordinary duties upon a flyer and to fight if need be. One of the two was Carcomac, the bowman. The other was not Carthoris. The Heliumite was mad with disappointment. He snatched his dagger from his harness, but already Astok had left the deck of the Caucasus, and he knew that before he could overtake him, should he dispatch Vascour, he would be killed by the Dusarian warriors, who now were thick upon the deck. With either one of the two alive, Thuvia was in as great danger as though both lived. It must be both. As Vascour descended to the ground, Carthoris boldly followed him, nor did any attempt to halt him, thinking, doubtless, that he was one of the party. After him came Carcomac and the Dusarian warrior who had been detailed to duty upon the Thuvia. Carthoris walked close to the left side of the latter. Now they came to the dense shadow under the side of the Thuvia. It was very dark there, so that they had to grope for the ladder. Carcomac preceded the Dusarian. The latter reached upward for the swinging rounds, and as he did so, steel fingers closed upon his windpipe, and a steel blade pierced the very centre of his heart. Turgeon, the panthan, was the last to clamber over the rail of the Thuvia, drawing the rope ladder in after him. A moment later, the flyer was rising rapidly, headed for the north. At the rail, Carcomac turned to speak to the warrior who had been detailed to accompany him. His eyes went wide as they rested upon the face of the young man whom he had met beside the granite cliffs that guard mysterious Lothar. How had he come in place of the Dusarian? A quick sign, and Carcomac turned once more to find the Thuvia's dwar that he might report himself for duty. Behind him followed the panthan. Carthoris blessed the chance that had caused Vascour to choose the bowman of all others, for had it been another Dusarian there would have been questions to answer as to the whereabouts of the warrior who lay so quietly in the field beyond the residence of Hal Vas, dwar of the southern road, and Carthoris had no answer to that question other than his sword point, which alone was scarce adequate to convince the entire crew of the Thuvia. The journey to Dusar seemed interminable to the impatient Carthoris, though as a matter of fact it was quickly accomplished. Some time before they reached their destination, they met and spoke with another Dusarian warflyer. From it they learned that a great battle was soon to be fought southeast of Dusar. The combined navies of Dusar, Parth, and Kaol had been intercepted in their advance toward Helium by the mighty Heliumitic navy, the most formidable upon Barsoom, not alone in numbers and armament, but in the training and courage of its officers and warriors, and the zitidaric proportions of many of its monster battleships. Not for many a day had there been the promise of such a battle. 4 Jedaks were in direct command of their own fleets: Kulan Tith of Kaol, Thuvan Dain of Parth, and Nutus of Dusar upon one side, while upon the other was Tardos Mors, Jedak of Helium. With the latter was John Carter, warlord of Mars. From the far north another force was moving south across the barrier cliffs, the new navy of Talu, Jedak of Okar, coming in response to the call from the warlord. Upon the decks of the sullen ships of war, black-bearded yellow men looked over eagerly toward the south. Gorgeous were they in their splendid cloaks of Orluk and Apt. Fierce, formidable fighters from the hothouse cities of the frozen north. And from the distant south, from the Sea of Omeen and the Cliffs of Gold, from the temples of the Ferns and the Garden of Ishus, other thousands sailed into the north at the call of the great man they all had learned to respect, and, respecting, love. Pacing the flagship of this mighty fleet, second only to the navy of Helium, was the Ebon Exodar, Jedak of the Firstborn, his heart beating strong in anticipation of the coming moment when he should hurl his savage crews and the weight of his mighty ships upon the enemies of the warlord. But would these allies reach the theatre of war in time to be of avail to Helium? Or would Helium need them? Carthoris, with the other members of the crew of the Thuvia, heard the gossip and the rumours. None knew of the 2 fleets, the one from the south and the other from the north, that were coming to support the ships of Helium, and all of Dusar were convinced that nothing now could save the ancient power of Helium from being wiped forever from the upper air of Barsoom. Carthoris, too, loyal son of Helium that he was, felt that even his beloved navy might not be able to cope successfully with the combined forces of 3 great powers. Now, the Thuvia touched the landing stage above the palace of Astok. Hurriedly the prince and Vaskor disembarked and entered the drop that would carry them to the lower levels of the palace. Close beside it was another drop that was utilized by common warriors. Carthoris touched Carcomac upon the arm. "Come," he whispered, "you are my only friend among a nation of enemies. Will you stand by me?" "To the death," replied Carcomac. The 2 approached the drop. A slave operated it. "Where are your passes?" he asked. Carthoris fumbled in his pocket pouch as though in search of them, at the same time entering the cage. Carcomac followed him, closing the door. The slave did not start the cage downward. Every second counted. They must reach the lower level as soon as possible after Astok and Vaskor if they would know whither the 2 went. Carthoris turned suddenly upon the slave, hurling him to the opposite side of the cage. "Bind and gag him, Carcomac," he cried. Then he grasped the control lever, and as the cage shot downward at sickening speed, the bowman grappled with the slave. Carthoris could not leave the control to assist his companion, for should they touch the lowest level at the speed at which they were going, all would be dashed to instant death. Below him, he could now see the top of Astok's cage in the parallel shaft, and he reduced the speed of his to that of the other. The slave commenced to scream. "Silence him!" cried Carthoris. A moment later, a limp form crumpled to the floor of the cage. "He is silenced!" said Carcomac. Carthoris brought the cage to a sudden stop at one of the higher levels of the palace. Opening the door, he grasped the still form of the slave and pushed it out upon the floor. Then he banged the gate and resumed the downward drop. Once more, he sighted the top of the cage that held Astok and Vaskor. An instant later it had stopped, and as he brought his car to a halt, he saw the 2 men disappear through one of the exits of the corridor beyond. Chapter 14. Kulan, Tith's sacrifice. The morning of the 2nd day of her incarceration in the east tower of the palace of Astok, Prince of Dusar, found Thuvia of Tarth waiting in dull apathy the coming of the assassin. She had exhausted every possibility of escape, going over and over again the door and the windows, the floor and the walls. The solid earthite slabs she could not even scratch. The tough Barsoomian glass of the windows would have shattered to nothing less than a heavy sledge in the hands of a strong man. The door and the lock were impregnable. There was no escape. and they had stripped her of her weapons so that she could not even anticipate the hour of her doom, thus robbing them of the satisfaction of witnessing her last moments. When would they come? Would a stock do the deed with his own hands? She doubted that he had the courage for it. At heart he was a coward. She had known it since first she had heard him brag as, a visitor at the court of her father, he had sought to impress her with his valour. She could not help but compare him with another, and with whom would an affianced bride compare an unsuccessful suitor? With her betrothed. And did Thuvia of Tarth now measure Astok of Dusar by the standards of Kulantith, Jeddak of Kaol? She was about to die. Her thoughts were her own to do with as she pleased, yet furthest from them with Kulantith. Instead, the figure of the tall and comely Heliumite filled her mind, crowding therefrom all other images. She dreamed of his noble face, the quiet dignity of his bearing, the smile that lit his eyes as he conversed with his friends, and the smile that touched his lips as he fought with his enemies. The fighting smile of his Virginian sire. And Thuvia of Tarth, true daughter of Barsoom, found her breath quickening and heart leaping to the memory of this other smile, the smile that she would never see again. With a little half-sob, the girl sank to the pile of silks and furs that were tumbled in confusion beneath the east windows, burying her face in her arms. In the corridor outside her prison room, two men had paused in heated argument. "I tell you again, Astok," one was saying, "that I shall not do this thing unless you be present in the room." There was little of the respect due royalty in the tone of the speaker's voice. The other, noting it, flushed. "Do not impose too far upon my friendship for you, Vascour," he snapped. "There is a limit to my patience." "There is no question of royal prerogative here," returned Vascour. "You asked me to become an assassin in your stead, and against your Jeddak's strict injunctions. You are in no position, Astok, to dictate to me, but rather should you be glad to accede to my reasonable request that you be present, thus sharing the guilt with me. Why should I bear it all?" The younger man scowled, but he advanced toward the locked door, and as it swung in upon its hinges, he entered the room beyond at the side of Vascour. Across the chamber the girl, hearing them enter, rose to her feet and faced them. Under the soft copper of her skin she blanched just a trifle, but her eyes were brave and level, and the haughty tilt of her firm little chin was eloquent of loathing and contempt. "You still prefer death?" asked Astok. "To you, yes," replied the girl coldly. The Prince of Dusar turned to Vascour and nodded. The noble drew his short sword and crossed the room toward Thuvia. "Kneel," he commanded. "I prefer to die standing," she replied. "As you will," said Vascour, feeling the point of his blade with his left thumb. "In the name of Nutus, Jeddak of Dusar," he cried, and ran quickly toward her. "In the name of Carthoris, Prince of Helium," came in low tones from the doorway. Vascour turned to see the panthan he had recruited at his son's house leaping across the floor toward him. The fellow brushed past Astok with an "After him, you calotte!" Vascour wheeled to meet the charging man. "What means this treason?" he cried. Astok, with bared sword, leaped to Vascour's assistance. The panthan's sword clashed against that of the noble, and in the first encounter Vascour knew that he faced a master swordsman. Before he half realized the stranger's purpose, he found the man between himself and Thuvia of Tarth, at bay facing the two swords of the Dusarians. But he fought not like a man at bay. Ever was he the aggressor, and though always he kept his flashing blade between the girl and her enemies, yet he managed to force them hither and thither about the room, calling to the girl to follow close behind him. Until it was too late, neither Vascour nor Astok dreamed of that which lay in the panthan's mind. But at last, as the fellow stood with his back toward the door, both understood. They were penned in their own prison, and now the intruder could slay them at his will, for Thuvia of Parth was bolting the door at the man's direction, first taking the key from the opposite side, where Astok had left it when they had entered. Astok, as was his way, finding that the enemy did not fall immediately before their swords, was leaving the brunt of the fighting to Vascour, and now, as his eyes appraised the panthan carefully, they presently went wider and wider, for slowly he had come to recognize the features of the Prince of Helium. The Heliumite was pressing close upon Vascour. The noble was bleeding from a dozen wounds. Astok saw that he could not for long withstand the cunning craft of that terrible sword hand. "Courage, Vascour," he whispered in the other's ear. "I have a plan. Hold him but a moment longer, and all will be well." But the balance of the sentence, with Astok, Prince of Dusar, he did not voice aloud. Vascour, dreaming no treachery, nodded his head, and for a moment succeeded in holding Carthoris at bay. Then the Heliumite and the girl saw the Dusarian prince run swiftly to the opposite side of the chamber, touch something in the wall that sent a great panel swinging inward and disappear into the black vault beyond. It was done so quickly that by no possibility could they have intercepted him. Carthoris, fearful lest Vascour might similarly elude him, or Astok return immediately with reinforcements, sprang viciously in upon his antagonist, and a moment later the headless body of the Dusarian noble rolled upon the azite floor. "Come!" cried Carthoris. "There is no time to be lost. Astok will be back in a moment with enough warriors to overpower me." But Astok had no such plan in mind, for such a move would have meant the spreading of the fact among the palace gossips that the Ptarthian princess was a prisoner in the East Tower. Quickly would the word have come to his father, and no amount of falsifying could have explained away the facts that the Jedek's investigation would have brought to light. Instead, Astok was racing madly through a long corridor to reach the door of the tower room before Carthoris and Thuvia left the apartment. He had seen the girl remove the key and place it in her pocket pouch, and he knew that a dagger point driven into the keyhole from the opposite side would imprison them in the secret chamber, till 8 dead worlds circled a cold, dead sun. As fast as he could run, Astok entered the main corridor that led to the tower chamber. Would he reach the door in time? What if the Heliumite should have already emerged, and he should run upon him in the passageway? Astok felt a cold chill run up his spine. He had no stomach to face that uncanny blade. He was almost at the door. Around the next turn of the corridor it stood. No, they had not left the apartment. Evidently Vascour was still holding the Heliumite. Astok could scarce repress a grin at the clever manner in which he had outwitted the noble and disposed of him at the same time. And then he rounded the turn and came face to face with an auburn-haired white giant. The fellow did not wait to ask the reason for his coming. Instead he leaped upon him with a long sword, so that Astok had to parry a dozen vicious cuts before he could disengage himself and flee back down the runway. A moment later Carthoris and Thuvia entered the corridor from the secret chamber. "Well, Carcomac," asked the Heliumite. "It is fortunate that you left me here, Red Man," said the bowman. "I but just now intercepted one who seemed over-anxious to reach this door. It was he whom they call Astok, Prince of Dusar." Carthoris smiled. "Where is he now?" he asked. "He escaped my blade and ran down this corridor," replied Carcomac. "We must lose no time then," exclaimed Carthoris. "He will have the guard upon us yet." Together, the three hastened along the winding passages through which Carthoris and Carcomac had tracked the Dusarians by the marks of the latter's sandals in the thin dust that overspread the floors of these seldom-used passage-ways. They had come to the chamber at the entrances to the lifts before they met with opposition. Here they found a handful of guardsmen and an officer, who, seeing that they were strangers, questioned their presence in the palace of Astok. Once more Carthoris and Carcomac had recourse to their blades, and before they had won their way to one of the lifts, the noise of the conflict must have aroused the entire palace, for they heard men shouting, and as they passed the many levels on their quick passage to the landing stage, they saw armed men running hither and thither in search of the cause of the commotion. Beside the stage lay the Thuvia, with 3 warriors on guard. Again, the Heliumite and the Lotharian fought shoulder to shoulder, but the battle was soon over, for the Prince of Helium alone would have been a match for any 3 that Dusar could produce. Scarce had the Thuvia risen from the way's air, 100 or more fighting men leaped to view upon the landing stage. At their head was Astok of Dusar, and as he saw the 2 he had thought so safely in his power slipping from his grasp, he danced with rage and chagrin, shaking his fists and hurling abuse and vile insults at them. With her bow inclined upward at a dizzy angle, the Thuvia shot meteor like into the sky. From a dozen points swift patrol boats darted after her, for the scene upon the landing stage above the palace of the Prince of Dusar had not gone unnoticed. A dozen times shots grazed the Thuvia's side, and as Carthoris could not lead the control levers, Thuvia of Parth turned the muzzles of the craft's rapid-fire guns upon the enemy as she clung to the steep and slippery surface of the deck. It was a noble race and a noble fight. 1 against a score now, for other Dusarian craft had joined in the pursuit, but Astok, Prince of Dusar, had built well when he built the Thuvia. None in the navy of his sire possessed a swifter flyer, no other craft so well armoured or so well armed. And one by one the pursuers were distanced, and as the last of them fell out of range behind, Carthoris dropped the Thuvia's nose to a horizontal plane, as with lever drawn to the last notch. she tore through the thin air of dying Mars toward the east and Ptarth. 13,500 hads away lay Ptarth, a stiff 30-hour journey for the swiftest of flyers, and between Duzar and Tarth might lie half the navy of Duzar, for in this direction was the reported seat of the great naval battle that even now might be in progress. Could Carthoris have known precisely where the great fleets of the contending nations lay, he would have hastened to them without delay, for in the return of Thuvia to her sire lay the greatest hope of peace. Half the distance they covered without sighting a single warship, and then Carcomac called Carthoris's attention to a distant craft that rested upon the ochre vegetation of the great dead sea bottom, above which the Thuvia was speeding. About the vessel many figures could be seen swarming. With the aid of powerful glasses, the Heliumite saw that they were green warriors, and that they were repeatedly charging down upon the crew of the stranded airship. The nationality of the latter he could not make out at so great a distance. It was not necessary to change the course of the Thuvia to permit of passing directly above the scene of battle, but Carthoris dropped his craft a few hundred feet that he might have a better and closer view. If the ship was of a friendly power, he could do no less than stop and direct his guns upon her enemies, though with the precious freight he carried he scarcely felt justified in landing, for he could offer but 2 swords in reinforcement, scarce enough to warrant jeopardizing the safety of the Princess of Tarth. As they came close above the stricken ship, they could see that it would be but a question of minutes before the green horde would swarm across the armoured bulwarks to glut the ferocity of their bloodlust upon the defenders. "It would be futile to descend," said Carthoris to Thuvia. "The craft may even be of Dessar, she shows no insignia. All that we may do is fire upon the hordemen," and as he spoke he stepped to one of the guns and deflected its muzzle toward the green warriors at the ship's side. At the first shot from the Thuvia, those upon the vessel below evidently discovered her for the first time. Immediately, a device fluttered from the bow of the warship on the ground. Thuvia of Tarth caught her breath quickly, glancing at Carthoris. The device was that of Culan Tith, Jeddak of Kael, the man to whom the Princess of Tarth was betrothed. How easy for the Heliumite to pass on, leaving his rival to the fate that could not for long be averted. No man could accuse him of cowardice or treachery, for Culan Tith was in arms against Helium, and, further, upon the Thuvia were not enough swords to delay even temporarily the outcome that already was a foregone conclusion in the minds of the watchers. What would Carthoris, Prince of Helium, do? Scarce had the device broken to the faint breeze ere the bow of the Thuvia dropped at a sharp angle toward the ground. "Can you navigate her?" asked Carthoris of Thuvia. The girl nodded. "I am going to try to take the survivors aboard," he continued. "It will need both Carcomac and myself to man the guns while the Kaolians take to the boarding tackle. Keep her bow depressed against the rifle fire. She can bear it better in her forward armour, and at the same time the propellers will be protected." He hurried to the cabin as Thuvia took the control. A moment later, the boarding tackle dropped from the keel of the Thuvia, and from a dozen points along either side, stout, knotted leathern lines trailed downward. At the same time, a signal broke from her bow, "Prepare to board us." A shout arose from the deck of the Kaolian warship. Carthoris, who by this time had returned from the cabin, smiled sadly. He was about to snatch from the jaws of death the man who stood between himself and the woman he loved. "Take the port bow gun, Carcomac," he called to the bowman, and himself stepped to the gun upon the starboard bow. They could now feel the sharp shock of the explosions of the green warrior's projectiles against the armoured sides of the staunch Thuvia. It was a forlorn hope at best. At any moment the repulsive ray tanks might be pierced. The men upon the Kaolian ship were battling with renewed hope. In the bow stood Culan Tith, a brave figure fighting beside his brave warriors, beating back the ferocious green men. The Thuvia came low above the other craft. The Kaolians were forming under their officers in readiness to board, and then a sudden fierce fusillade from the rifles of the green warriors vomited their hail of death and destruction into the side of the brave flyer. Like a wounded bird, she dived suddenly marsward, careening drunkenly. Thuvia turned the bow upward in an effort to avert the imminent tragedy. But she succeeded only in lessening the shock of the flyer's impact as she struck the ground beside the Kaolian ship. When the green men saw only 2 warriors and a woman upon the deck of the Thuvia, a savage shout of triumph arose from their ranks, while an answering groan broke from the lips of the Kaolians. The former now turned their attention upon the new arrival, for they saw her defenders could soon be overcome, and that from her deck they could command the deck of the better manned ship. As they charged, a shout of warning came from Culan Tith upon the bridge of his own ship, and with it an appreciation of the valor of the act that had put the smaller vessel in these sore straits. "Who is it," he cried, "that offers his life in the service of Kulantith? Never was wrought a nobler deed of self-sacrifice upon Barsoom." The green horde was scrambling over the Thuvia side as there broke from the bow the device of Carthoris, Prince of Helium, in reply to the query of the Jeddak of Kael. None upon the smaller flyer had opportunity to note the effect of this announcement upon the Kaelians, for their attention was claimed slowly now by that which was transpiring upon their own deck. Carcomac stood behind the gun he had been operating, staring with wide eyes at the onrushing, hideous green warriors. Carthoris, seeing him thus, felt a pang of regret that, after all, this man that he had thought so valorous should prove, in the hour of need, as spineless as Jarv or Tario. "Carcomac, the man!" he shouted. "Grip yourself. Remember the days of the glory of the seafarers of Lothar. Fight, fight, man. Fight as never man fought before. All that remains to us is to die fighting." Carcomac turned toward the Heliumite, a grim smile upon his lips. "Why should we fight?" he asked. "Against such fearful odds. There is another way, a better way. Look," he pointed toward the companion, way that led below deck. The green men, a handful of them, had already reached the Thuvia's deck as Carthoris glanced in the direction the Lotharian had indicated. The sight that met his eyes set his heart to thumping in joy and relief. Thuvia of Tarth might yet be saved, and from below there poured a stream of giant bowmen, grim and terrible. Not the bowmen of Tario or Jav, but the bowmen of an Odwar of bowmen, savage fighting men, eager for the fray. The green warriors paused in momentary surprise and consternation, but only for a moment. Then with horrid war cries they leaped forward to meet these strange new foemen. A volley of arrows stopped them in their tracks. In a moment the only green warriors upon the deck of the Thuvia were dead warriors, and the bowmen of Carcomac were leaping over the vessel's sides to charge the hordemen upon the ground. Uten after Uten tumbled from the bowels of the Thuvia to launch themselves upon the unfortunate green men. Kulantith and his Kaolians stood wide-eyed and speechless with amazement as they saw thousands of these strange, fierce warriors emerge from the companion, way of the small craft that could not comfortably have accommodated more than 50. At last the green men could withstand the onslaught of overwhelming numbers no longer. Slowly, at first, they fell back across the ochre plain. The bowmen pursued them. Carcomac, standing upon the deck of the Thuvia, trembled with excitement. At the top of his lungs he voiced the savage war cry of his forgotten day. He roared encouragement and commands at his battling Utens, and then, as they charged further and further from the Thuvia, he could no longer withstand the lure of battle. Leaping over the ship's side to the ground, he joined the last of his bowmen as they raced off over the dead sea bottom in pursuit of the fleeing green horde. Beyond a low promontory of what once had been an island, the green men were disappearing toward the west. Close upon their heels raced the fleet bowmen of a bygone day, and forging steadily ahead among them, Carthoris and Thuvia could see the mighty figure of Carcomac brandishing aloft the Torquasian short sword with which he was armed as he urged his creatures after the retreating enemy. As the last of them disappeared behind the promontory, Carthoris turned toward Thuvia of Parth. "They have taught me a lesson, these vanishing bowmen of Lothar," he said. "When they have served their purpose, they remain not to embarrass their masters by their presence. Kulantith and his warriors are here to protect you. My acts have constituted the proof of my honesty of purpose. Goodbye," and he knelt at her feet, raising a bit of her harness to his lips. The girl reached out a hand and laid it upon the thick black hair of the head bent before her. Softly she asked, "Where are you going, Carthoris?" "With Carcomac, the bowman," he replied. "There will be fighting and forgetfulness." The girl put her hands before her eyes, as though to shut out some mighty temptation from her sight. "May my ancestors have mercy upon me," she cried, "if I say the thing I have no right to say, but I cannot see you cast your life away, Carthoris, Prince of Helium. Stay, my chieftain. Stay, I love you." A cough behind them brought both about, and there they saw standing, not 2 paces from them, Kulantith, Jeddak of Kael. For a long moment none spoke. Then Kulantith cleared his throat. "I could not help hearing all that passed," he said. "I am no fool, to be blind to the love that lies between you. Nor am I blind to the lofty honour that has caused you, Carthoris, to risk your life and hers to save mine, though you thought that that very act would rob you of the chance to keep her for your own. Nor can I fail to appreciate the virtue that has kept your lips sealed against words of love for this Heliumite, Thuvia, for I know that I have but just heard the first declaration of your passion for him. I do not condemn you. Rather should I have condemned you, had you entered a loveless marriage with me. Take back your liberty, Thuvia of Parth, he cried, and bestow it where your heart already lies enchained. And when the golden collars are clasped about your necks, you will see that Kulan Tith's is the first sword to be raised in declaration of eternal friendship for the new princess of Helium and her royal mate. A glossary of names AND terms used INTHE Martian books Anther, a dead city of ancient Mars, Isle of Hope, an isle leading to the courtroom in Helium, Apt, an Arctic monster, a huge, white-furred creature with 6 limbs, 4 of which, short and heavy, carry it over the snow and ice, the other 2, which grow forward from its shoulders on either side of its long, powerful neck, terminate in white, hairless hands with which it seizes and holds its prey. Its head and mouth are similar in appearance to those of a hippopotamus, except that from the sides of the lower jawbone, 2 mighty horns curve slightly downward toward the front. Its 2 huge eyes extend in 2 vast oval patches from the center of the top of the cranium down either side of the head to below the roots of the horns, so that these weapons really grow out from the lower part of the eyes, which are composed of several thousand ocelli each. Each ocellus is furnished with its own lid, and the Apt can, at will, close as many of the facets of his huge eyes as he chooses. CTHA, Warlord OFMARS, Astok, Prince of Dusar, Avenue of Ancestors, a street in Helium, Banth, Barsoomian lion, a fierce beast of prey that roams the low hills surrounding the dead seas of ancient Mars. It is almost hairless, having only a great, bristly mane about its thick neck. Its long, live body is supported by 10 powerful legs. Its enormous jaws are equipped with several rows of long needle-like fangs, and its mouth reaches to a point far back of its tiny ears. It has enormous protruding eyes of green. CTHEGODSOFMARS, Barcomas. Jeddak of Warhoon. See a Princess OFMARS, Barsoom. MARS, Black Pirates of Barsoom. Men 6 feet and over in height, have clear-cut and handsome features. Their eyes are well set and large, though a slight narrowness lends them a crafty appearance. The iris is extremely black, while the eyeball itself is quite white and clear. Their skin has the appearance of polished ebony. CTHEGODSOFMARS, Calot, a dog, about the size of a Shetland pony and has 10 short legs. The head bears a slight resemblance to that of a frog, except that the jaws are equipped with 3 rows of long, sharp tusks. See a Princess OFMARS. Carter, John, Warlord of Mars, Carthoris of Helium, son of John Carter and Deja Thoris, Dak Kova, Jed among the Warhoons, later Jedek, Darsine, chameleon, like reptile, Data, chief or prince among the firstborn, Deja Thoris, princess of Helium, Jor Kantos, son of Kantos, Khan, Padwar of the 5th Utan, Dor, Valley of Heaven. John Carter's Martian name, from the surnames of the first 2 warrior chieftains he killed. Dusar, a Martian kingdom. Dwar, captain, a site, a kind of stone. Father of Therns, high priest of religious cult, firstborn. Black race, black pirates. Kar Komak, Odwar of Lotharian bowmen, gate of Jedeks, a gate in Helium. Gozava. Tars Tarkas's dead wife. Gurtas. Dwar of the 10th Utane. Hard, Martian mile. Hal Vas, son of Vas Kor the Dazarian noble. Hasta, a city of Helium. Hecador, title of father of Therns. Helium, the empire of the grandfather of Deja Thoris. Holy Therns, a Martian religious cult. Horton Gur, Jeddak of Torquus. Horvastus, Padwar in the navy of Helium. Horse, deserted city, Barsoomian Greenwich. Ilol, a city of Okar. Is, river of death. See a Princess OFMARS Ishus, goddess of death, whose abode is upon the banks of the lost sea of Chorus. CTHEGODSOFMRS, Jav, a Lotharian. Jed, king. Jedek, emperor. Kab Kaja, Jedek of the Warhoons of the south. Kadabra, capital of Okar. Kada, guard. Kalxus, cruiser, transport under Vaskor. Kantos Kan. Hadwa, in the Helium Navy. Kyle, a Martian kingdom in the Eastern Hemisphere. Kau, greeting. Karad, Martian degree. Komal, Andring, the Lotharian god, a huge banth. Korad, a dead city of ancient Mars. Sea Princess Ofmars, Chorus, the lost sea of Dor. Kulantith, Jedak of Kael. Cthe, warlord Ofmars, Lakor, a Thurn. Larok, a Duzarian warrior, artificer. Lorquas Tomel, Jed among the Tharks. Sea Princess Ofma Arses, Lothar. The Forgotten City. Marantina, a principality of Okar. Matai Shung, father of Therns. Cthegodsofmars, Mors Karjak, a Jed of Lesser Helium. Notan, royal psychologist of Zodanga. Nutus, Jedak of Dusar. Ode, Martian foot. Odd war, a commander or general. Okar, land of the yellow men. Old Ben, or Uncle Ben. The writer's body servant, coloured. Omad, man with one name. Omin, the buried sea. Orluk, a black and yellow striped Arctic monster, Ots Mountains, surrounding the Valley Dor and the lost Sea of Chorus. Padwar, lieutenant. Panthon, a soldier of fortune. Parthak, the Zodangan who brought food to John Carter in the pits of Zataras. Cthegodsofmars, pedestal of truth, within the courtroom of Helium. Fedor, daughter of Matai Shang. Cthsofmars, Pimalia, gorgeous flowering plant. Plant men of Barsoom, a race inhabiting the Valley Dor. They are 10 or 12 feet in height when standing erect. Their arms are very short and fashioned after the manner of an elephant's trunk, being sinuous. The body is hairless and ghoulish, blue except for a broad band of white, which encircles the protruding single eye, the pupil, iris and ball of which are dead white. The nose is a ragged, inflamed, circular hole in the centre of the blank face, resembling a fresh bullet wound which has not yet commenced to bleed. There is no mouth in the head. With the exception of the face, the head is covered by a tangled mass of jet-black hair, some 8 or 10 inches in length. Each hair is about the thickness of a large angleworm. The body, legs and feet are of human shape, but of monstrous proportions, the feet being fully 3 feet long and very flat and broad. The method of feeding consists in running their odd hands over the surface of the turf, cropping off the tender vegetation with razor-like talons and sucking it up from 2 mouths, which lie one in the palm of each hand. They are equipped with a massive tail about 6 feet long, quite round where it joins the body, but tapering to a flat, thin blade towards the end, which trails at right angles to the ground. Cthegodsofmars. Prince Soren, overlord of the navy of Tarth. Tarth, a Martian kingdom. Tor, family name of 3 Zodangan brothers. Zabthan, prince of Zodanga. Sea Princess Ofmars, Safad, a Martian inch. Sark, jump. Salensis Ol, Jedak of Okar. Cthe, warlord Ofmars, Saran Tau. Carthoris major, Domo. Sarkoja, a green Martian woman. Sea Princess Ofmars, Satyr Throg, a holy Thurn of the 10th cycle, Shader, island in Amin, used as a prison. Cillian, slimy reptiles inhabiting the Sea of Chorus. Sith hornet, like monster, bald-faced and about the size of a Hereford bull, has frightful jaws in front and mighty poison sting behind. The eyes, of myriad facets, cover 3/4 of the head, permitting the creature to see in all directions at one and the same time. Ctha, warlord Ofmars. Skeel, a Martian hardwood. Sola, a young green Martian woman. Solon, an official of the palace. Sompus, a kind of tree. Sorak, a little pet animal among the red Martian women, about the size of a cat. Sorapus, a Martian hardwood. Sorav, an officer of Silences All. Tal, a Martian second. Tal Hajas, Jedak of Thark. Helu, rebel prince of Marantina. Tangama, Warhoon warrior. Tardos Mors, grandfather of Carthoris and Jeddak of Helium. Tario, Jeddak of Lothar. Tars Tarkas, a green man, chieftain of the Tharks. Temple of Reward, in Helium. 10th cycle. A sphere or plane of eminence among the holy Therns. Thabis issues chief. Thancosis. See a princess Ofmars. Thark. City and name of a green Martian horde. Thote. A green Martian horse. 10 feet high at the shoulder, with 4 legs on either side, a broad, flat tail, larger at the tip than at the root which it holds straight out behind while running, a mouth splitting its head from snout to the long, massive neck. It is entirely devoid of hair, and is of a dark slate colour and exceedingly smooth and glossy. It has a white belly, and the legs are shaded from slate at the shoulders and hips to a vivid yellow at the feet. The feet are heavily padded and nailless. See a princess Ofmars. Thorban. Jed among the green men of Torquus. Thorian. Chief of the lesser Therns. Throne of righteousness. In the courtroom of Helium. Throxus. Mightiest of the 5 oceans. Thirds. A green horde inimical to Torquus. Thuvia. The nearer moon. Thurid. A black data. Thuvendine. Jeddak of Tarth. Thuvia. Princess of Tarth. Torith. Officer of the guards at Submarine Pool. Torkar Bar. Kaelian noble, dwar of the Kaelian road. Torquas. A green horde. Turgeon. Carthoris's alias. Utane. A company of 100 men, military. Vas Corps. A Duzarian noble. Warhoon. A community of green men, enemy of Thark. Woola and Parg. A Barsoomian calot. Xat. A Martian minute. Xaverian. A helium warship. Exodar. Data among the firstborn. Yestad, commander of the submarine. Zad, Tharkian warrior. Zat Arasa, Jed of Zodanga. Zithad, data of the guards of Ishus. CTHA, GODS, OFMARS, Zitidars. Macedonian draft animals. Zodanga, Martian city of red men at war with Helium. Zod, a Martian hour.